Next, I want to introduce a young man that I am really impressed with, Mike Davis. I met Mike because of Mark Pogendorf had him on the hobby show segment that he did. And I was so impressed with Mike that I called him up and I said, look, how about coming on the show periodically and talking about the young modeler and his viewpoint and what he wants out of the hobby, and try to bring some perspective to the show so that we kind of understand what the younger generation is trying to look for. I think a lot of us on the show are really curious to find out, because we keep hearing, how are we going to get young people involved in the hobby? Where are the young people? And then you don't hear anybody say, well, you need to do this, 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 and this. So I'm hoping that by having Mike on periodically, that maybe we can try to figure out and maybe have more young people join our show. So Mike, welcome. I really appreciate you doing this.
Hey, Jim, I'm here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me, Jim. It's a pleasure. Yeah, I frequently hear a lot among modeling circles. One of the biggest lines I've heard on repeat almost nonstop is the hobby is dying. And that's been a line in the hobby for, I'd say, the past 30 years, 40 years. I've read Model Railroader magazine issues from the 1980s that had the same, like, the hobby's got to be dead in 20 years. Well, 40 years later, it's still kicking and very much alive. I mean, you wouldn't see manufacturers cranking out all the cool stuff.
As you're talking.
What?
No, go ahead. Somebody doesn't have their
Okay.
Jim, it's Steve Sherrill.
Oh, hi, Steve. How are you? Listen, let me. I didn't know whether you were on the show or not, but I'll come back to you right after Mike then.
Okay.
Thank you.
Basically, my argument is you wouldn't see all these manufacturers cranking out a lot of really cool, neat, new stuff if the hobby was dying. No one's sinking the kind of money into manufacturing that they do for something that's not going to be around in 10 or 20 years. They just wouldn't. I think the principal reason a lot of the older generation thinks that the hobby is dying is because when you go to a train show, the age demographic, or in clubs, the age demographic you see tends to skew very much older than younger. And also the things that they're typically interested in, not as many new people are getting interested in. That's my opinion as to why people seem to think the hobby is dying. They just don't see as much, they only see old people around. I argue that the young people are there, they're just usually not as visible or not as able to participate. And part of what I want to do in this show is sort of illustrate to a lot of people in the older demographic, why that might be. But not only that, I also want to touch on topics that are relevant to younger crowd, talk about, what the older crowd could do to be more receptive to the younger crowd. And on days where I might not have a subject specific to the younger crowd, I plan to just be a younger face on the channel and maybe present the topic for modeling interest, like, hey, here's a cool, neat short line railroad that might be of interest to people old and young, or here's something I did, model railroad wise that you could do. Like, I have an idea for one day showing how I built and painted a scale model house without all the fancy tools that some of us might have, because people in my age group might not have the space, money, or ability to have like a spray booth and a sanding booth and all the fancy gadgets that some of the older guys do. That's some examples. Well, at least for today, I just mainly want to introduce myself and sort of set the stage for what's going to be coming forward. I got another thing I will say in a minute, but for next time, next time I plan on being on will be in about 3 months. I want a lot of you to think about, like, what's some questions you've had for the younger crowd that you've always wanted to ask, but never had a chance to talk about, or really just never had a chance to go, hey, why do you think X? So next time it'll be a sort of a Q&A session as to why, what's a burning question you wanted to ask a younger modeler that you haven't had a chance to. Matter of fact, I think I got a couple minutes now. So what's a question that somebody has had that they want to know?
What's your favorite era?
I'm sorry?
Huh?
What's his favorite era, Mike? What's your favorite era?
I don't have just one, but if I had to pick one era, I would say 1980 Southern Pacific. However, I also have a huge interest in logging and narrow gauge. Yes, HON3. I'm an HON3 guy that's under the age of 50. They do exist. I actually know a couple other guys who are HON3 guys who are under the age of 50. And yes, we're also tired of being asked, is it N scale?
Thank you,
Let's have a
sir.
question. I have a question for you. What is it that you think should be out there for the younger guys that isn't?
It's not just one thing that I think is not out there that the younger guys want, but something that you receive a lot more support to attract the younger guys would be a lot more emphasis on more modern equipment like Amtrak or GEVOs. What I've noticed when I talk to people as far as what they're into modeling, it tends to be what they remember in their formative years between, I'd say, the ages of 10 and 25. And for a lot of people in the age group of most of the gentlemen I see on the channel right now, that tends to be a lot of transition era or Gen 1 diesels or, very early stuff. In my age bracket, we're into my age bracket's formative years is like post mega mergers of the 90s. We're used to seeing patch jobs. We're used to seeing like pretty much all the railroads evolve into Union Pacific, BNSF, CSX, Amtrak, short lines, regionals. That's what we're used to seeing in our formative years. My case is a bit different that I didn't have a functioning railroad in my backyard for that good chunk of that time. So my interest came from a lot of history books that I read, which is how I got into logging and narrow gauge and 80 Southern Pacific, because that's what I read.
Yeah, so I would agree with you, and the thing that I'm doing is I'm trying to keep my railway fairly modern, like with the newest style locomotives and all that kind of stuff, railway cars. So what it means is you're running longer stock, which means you have to have wider radius, and that may be a little hard to do in some for a teenager because he's got to kind of live with his parents and that kind of stuff. But you know what? I really enjoy the modern era stuff. And because exactly for the same reason, that's what's out there. That's what we're seeing. And, and so the other side of me is that if you want to model that, you better get out there to trackside, keep your safe distance and get some good shots of what's going by. And that really helps, I think. It's really encouraging.
Mind you, what I said is more of a generalization. There are definitely a lot of exceptions to the rule. I know plenty of old guys who model new stuff, and I know plenty of young guys who model old stuff. But overarching, people tend to model what they remember their formative years. I know plenty of guys who, read something in a history book one time and were like, that's really cool. I want to model that. Like there's a guy near me who models, I think it's called the Central New England. No, the Vermont, some East Coast railroad, but I don't think he's actually lived there. He just really likes it from a history book.
Yeah.
And the other thing I'd ask is, do you like the models that are currently out there where they're basically ready to run, beautifully detailed, not thinking like Rapido and those kind of guys? And like the other thing that's come to market in the last 5-6 years is complete build-ups, and where you don't paint it yourself, it's all done, the whole bit. The thing that I see about that is when you do the cost analysis, it's actually cheaper to buy a build-up than to buy all the paints, do it all yourself, and the whole schmoz. So, I know there's advantage. I just want to know what the young guys think about that.
A lot of the young guys, I think, really like the ready to roll and put out of the box and sticking on the layout stuff. Not some of it's out of laziness. I'm personally I'm a lazy guy. I will not. I'll be honest. I'm lazy when it comes to this stuff. I don't want to spend all day building a Craftsman kit and a brass locomotive puzzle, as someone puts it, is not exactly my idea of a good time. It's actually my idea of the third circle of hell. But I think some of it's laziness, which nothing wrong with that. I think a lot of it is some of the old new guy, like young guys, just don't have the kind of time and energy that older crowds would to sit down there and build a kit or weather a car. They just want to be able to take it out of the box, stick it on the tracks, and watch it run.
Yeah. That's good. That's good. You know, the other thing too that's come along, and this particular group is basically Craftsman scratch built and Craftsman kits. But there's an awful lot of really good plastic kits out there that don't take as long to do, and you paint them up properly and they look pretty good. And so we see that, and the plastic kits are good quality now, and they tend to be less expensive than the wood laser cut kits. What do you think about that?
Eye of the beholder. I mean, if you like it, you buy it. No what it's the same thing I say whenever I hear someone complaining about a manufacturer putting out an item they don't like. It's like, if you like it, buy it. If you don't like it, nobody's forcing you to buy it. You can just ignore it and let the other guy enjoy it. I know a couple guys that have given me all kinds of teasing and prodding for me buying a freelance locomotive that never existed. If I'm like, I enjoy it, I have fun with it, leave me alone.
What about the electronic side of the hobby?
The young guys really like the electronic end of it, especially being able to link their phone to their DCC system and control it off that. I think the biggest advantage of that is one less device I can lose. One less device I have to keep track of. Me personally, I mean, whenever I go to club functions, I prefer one old. I go old school when it comes to DCC throttles. I don't really like using the phone. I've never really used the phone, and I just not a fan of it. I mean, I never tried it, but it doesn't really appeal to me. I prefer good old fashioned DCC throttle. But I know lots of young guys who love to be able to connect with their phone and run a train that way. And like I said, dealer's choice. If you like it, you like it.
Ray, I would love to be able to find manufacturers with these plastic kits. I've heard other people say what you said earlier. I haven't been able to find one to come on the show. If you can put me in contact or suggest a plastic kit manufacturer that I can call, I'll be glad to call them and invite them to come on the show and show how their kits can be used for model railroaders. I'd love to be able to do that.
I might just add something there on the kits. As far as the overwhelming amount of plastic kits out there, the biggest ones seem to be Walters and Cornerstone for HO and somewhat for N. And there is a ton of beautiful laser cut kits, wood laser cut kits out in the market. But again, they're a little more pricey. But Walters is probably, Walters Cornerstone is probably the biggest supplier of plastic kits.
Plastic, I will find out. Thank you so much. Mike,
Okay,
thanks so much for being here tonight. I really do appreciate it, and I'll look forward to you back in June. I think we've got you scheduled for.
Yeah, I think that's the case. One of the topics I will touch upon at a later date is about the young guys simply not having the kind of free time that a lot of the older crowd does to do model railroading. And as much as I would love to do a more frequent showing, I personally don't feel I have the bandwidth for more than once a quarter because I'm only 26 and I got a lot going on.
I can't thank you enough. I think this is going to be a real eye-opener for a lot of us. And I really do appreciate you taking the time to be with us.
Thank you for having me, Jim. And I will be in touch with you. I will be in touch with you. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening.
You too. Thanks so much, Mike.